We have some wonderful sources from which to learn about the life and ministry of A.L. Frisbie, the fourth minister of Plymouth Church and the King David figure of the 19th century. There is an autobiography which was written in 1902 and edited and augmented by his widow in 1920. And there is a 75th birthday sermon which Dr. Frisbie preached on October 22nd, 1905, in which he reflects back over his life and ministry. Various documents also exist in the archives to shed light on this important figure. So I'll structure this presentation as follows. We'll begin with a section on Frisbie facts, drawn largely from the autobiography. Next we'll examine Frisbie's core convictions, largely from his own words. And finally, we'll look at his accomplishments and ongoing legacy at Plymouth. Some of the sections of this presentation will be a lot of words on the screen, I'm afraid. I wish there were better photographic documentation of this period, but I think the material is well worth our consideration, and I'll try to move through it briskly. Alva Lily Frisbie, I imagine I'd also go by A.L., was born on October 22, 1830 in Tompkins, New York. His parents were George and Bernice Lowry Frisbie. He was the youngest of 4 children, his elders being Daniel, Adeline, and Tyler. Alva's father died in 1834 when the boy was just 4 years old, but his father had been mentally unsound for some time, and the family was thrown into severe poverty. They went to live with George's younger brother, Alva's uncle Orrin Frisbie, in Otisco, New York. Alva and his mother lived on an adjoining farm for 5 or 6 years. There was an orchard, a schoolhouse was nearby, and the school's library was kept in Alva's home. He recounts having been pretty happy during this period. In 1841, when Alva was 11, his sister married Garish Wyman Newell, and Alva went to live with them for a year and a half or so. This did not go well. Reading between the lines of the autobiography, it sounds to the modern ear as though Alva was abused. He refers to Mr. Newell's peculiar temper, unfortunate surroundings, and he characterizes himself as not altogether a very good boy. It sounds to me as though he was beaten and rather thought he deserved it. In any event, in 1842, he returned to live with his uncle Orrin, where it sounds as though there was more of the same, and he recounts rather severe handling there. In spite of this, Alva excelled academically. 1847, when Alva is 17, marks the first overt mention of religion, when Alva joined the Otisco Church along with his brother Tyler. From this point on, education was catch as catch can for a while. Half a term in the academy at Homer, a stint teaching in Clay, where his brother Daniel had become superintendent, and in 1850 Alva begins to study Latin with Otisco Pastor Strong, and to live with the Strongs for a time. In 1852, already 22 by this time, Alva enrolls in Oberlin College in Ohio. The next year, enthralled with a get-rich scheme that involved peddling papier-mâché, believe me, I have no idea how this would have worked. It sounds like one of those late-night real estate infomercials today. Frisbie briefly sought his fortune in the world. Defeated, he returns to Otisco and Homer Academy to pursue studies in Greek and German. In the winter of 1853, he falls in love with Addie O'Farrell and is engaged to be married. His comment on this is typical of his very dry sense of humor. This was, he says, not a wise move, for she was not a suitable partner for life, a slender girl in all ways. The spring term of 1854 found Frisbie teaching at Onsawagee Valley Academy. Scraping together enough money to enroll that fall in Amherst College, which granted him advanced standing, as a soon-to-be 24-year-old sophomore. In the winter of 1856, it was back to teaching, this time at Sutton, Massachusetts, where he meets and is smitten by Jerusha Slocum. He writes to Addie O'Farrell, the slender girl, to break off the engagement, but that letter is lost in a fire. Unaware of this, Frisbie is engaged to marry Miss Slocum. Finally, in August of 1857, now nearly 27, Frisbie graduates from Amherst. He moves to New Haven to study divinity, then moves on to Andover Seminary a year later when one of his principal teachers at Yale dies. The second term of that 1858-59 school year he would spend at Newton Seminary, a Baptist school. Andover and Newton have since combined to be Andover-Newton Seminary. Catchy name, isn't it? In the summer of 1858, Alva Frisbie supplied the pulpit of the Ansonia, Connecticut church, and they liked him. He returned there the next summer and then was called to be their pastor. Gainfully employed at last, the young pastor and Jerusha Slocum were married on August 23, 1859, and Frisbie was promptly sued by Adeline O'Farrell for breach of promise. He doesn't say much about the settlement, but he does indicate that the case went the other way. On March 22, 1860, Alva Lily Frisbie is ordained to the Christian ministry at Ansonia, Connecticut. In November of that year, the first Frisbie child is born, daughter Lillian Hope. 2 years later, daughter Mary Lucretia is born and dies at 5 months. In our day and age, the loss of a child is an unspeakable tragedy. We expect our children to outlive us. But in the mid-19th century, as in much of the world today, such things were commonplace. In 1863, another child is born, daughter Grace Elaine. In September of 1863, still at the height of the Civil War, Frisbie joins the 20th Regular Connecticut Volunteer Infantry as a chaplain. He serves at the Christian Commission near Norfolk, Virginia, and sees action with Sherman's army at Lookout Mountain and in northern Alabama. He resigns the following May, 1864, to return to Ansonia. In July of 1865, the Reverend Mr. Frisbie is called to the ministry of the Congregational Church at Danbury, Connecticut. He writes of these years with some modesty, characterizing his ministry as not a shining success. But in editing these reflections in 1920, his widow notes that the congregation later passed a resolution expressing sorrow and regret at Frisbie's leaving and extending united and undiminished confidence and affection to him and his family. Son Albert was born during the family's Danbury years in 1867. In the summer of 1871, A.L. Frisbie first visited Des Moines. He found it full of cheap new buildings and muddy streets, but he liked the people. The family moved in October of 1871, boarded at the Cleghorn House for a time, and rented a home for the winter. The next April, they moved into the DeForest House on 5th above Center. Was this the same place his predecessor, Henry DeForest, had lived? I presume it was. The next month, May of 1872, Jerusha Frisbie dies after giving birth to their daughter Ruth. The baby was to live only 5 months and died in October of that same year. Frisbie's niece, Addie Newell of Mitchell, comes to live with the family as a housekeeper. That summer of 1872, Frisbie returns east on vacation, but with the purpose in mind of finding a new wife. He renews a contact from Danbury, Martha Crosby of Saratoga Springs. The next January, she agrees to marry. In March, Alva makes another visit, and they are married at Danbury on July 29, 1873. They honeymoon with Addie and the children in Minneapolis. 10 years Alva's junior, Martha will be a wonderful partner and an important factor in the life of Plymouth Church for the rest of Alva's life and until her own death in 1931. The next winter, Alva is sick for several months with what sounds to me like hepatitis. He is out of the pulpit for 5 months, and in June of 1875, daughter Mabel Everett is born. In the spring of 1876, work is begun on a much-needed new church building just across the street from the old building at 7th and Locust. The handsome new Gothic edifice is dedicated in January of 1877, and a new Frisbie home is built at 723 5th Street. In November, son Alfred is born, making 1877 an altogether remarkable year in the Frisbie household. In 1882, the Reverend Mr. Frisbie becomes the Reverend Dr. Frisbie, receiving an honorary D.D., Doctor of Divinity, from Amherst College. That fall, Plymouth Church celebrates its 25th anniversary. J.T. Cook and Henry DeForest write lengthy letters of remembrance and congratulation, and J.M. Chamberlain returns in person to share in the festivities. The church continues to grow, and in 1893, P.H. Metcalf is called as an assistant pastor. For the rest of Frisbie's pastorate, Metcalf's salary will be specially subscribed. He proves to be a great help in Christian Endeavor, which was the young people's program of the day, and also with the church school. In 1893, Frisbie travels to Chicago to attend the Columbian Exposition and to participate there in the World Parliament of Religions. This is emblematic of his open spirit and inquiring mind. 1896 will mark the 25th anniversary of Frisbie's pastorate. In January of 1899, Dr. A. L. Frisbie resigns as minister of Plymouth Church and is elected pastor emeritus by the congregation, many of whom have never known another pastor of Plymouth Church. He remains in office until the arrival of his successor, Francis Van Horn, a youthful, energetic, and somewhat flamboyant pastor from the East. Frisbie remains in Des Moines and remains active in and around Plymouth Church. He serves as a field representative for Iowa College, later to become Grinnell College. In 1902, a new Plymouth building is erected at 8th and Pleasant, largely as a result of the institutional momentum from the Frisbie years. In October of 1905, Frisbie preaches his 75th birthday sermon in the new Plymouth building, where Frank Hodgson is now the pastor. A. L. Frisbie dies on December 17, 1917, at the age of 87. He has been pastor or pastor emeritus of Plymouth Church for 46 years. The story of Frisbie's life has a great deal to tell us about the person and the pastor he became. Even from an early age, he was no stranger to suffering, with his father's illness and death, the family's poverty, his moving from home to home, and the abuse he received at the hand of a series of father figures. But he did not become embittered. Instead, he perceived in and through his life the presence and guidance of God. And he decided that the stern and strict God he had been taught about in church was a fiction. For the God he came to know was the loving Father he never had. His favorite hymn all his life was "The King of Love, my shepherd is." It's playing in the background of this narration. Frisbie trusted his experience over established orthodoxy, much in the spirit of the emerging liberal theological movement of his day. His warm, welcoming, and deeply pastoral nature did much to determine the kind of church Plymouth became. Here he puts it in his own words. "I was not credulous or passively receptive. It was not my thought that my business in the pulpit would be to retail what those wise men, the professors, told me. For it seemed to me that I had learned things better than some dogmas affirmed, under a teacher who did not mistake." Of course, that teacher to whom he refers is God. He summarizes how his theology took shape. "I came into the ministry not with a set of opinions neatly made up into packages, labeled and laid away for future use. Not so much of that, at least, as some of my fellow students. And with a readiness always to look for the better thing and the better way. Through many agents, through material, human, and spiritual instrumentalities, God has taught me from my youth, and no lesson more strongly than this, that my need of him is absolute, and his support sure." This inner certitude was the source of Frisbie's sense of being called to the ministry. He understood that calling very clearly. "To make the mean man, if any such came to hear me, ashamed of his meanness, to make the man with a hard-hearted devotion to the getting of money feel the unworthiness of that devotion, to make every unfilial child of God anxious to have and to show the Spirit becoming the child of such a Father, has been my ambition." It was his own experience that it doesn't work to try to frighten people into faith. He sought to win hearts by demonstrating the loving kindness that he himself had found in God. To Frisbie, this didn't need to be terribly complicated. "While making small claims as a theologian, I still have had a theology dear to me and precious, based mainly on the Ten Commandments, the Lord's Prayer, the Beatitudes, and the parable of the prodigal son, 4 indispensable factors of any teaching through which Jesus Christ shall win the world." Such a faith, for Frisbie, had to issue in acts of love that had as their end the reshaping of the world. He wrote, "I have tried honestly to win my people to the love of God and familiarize them with the thought that the Christian life which promises anything good must be an outreaching to the world in a ministry of love." Of course, it was not Frisbie, but a later Plymouth minister, Stoddard Lane, who coined the Plymouth Church motto. But we can't help but think that Frisbie would have been very much at home with it. "We agree to differ. We resolve to love. We unite to serve." Frisbie also had a sense of humor, something rather rare in those dour days in the church. In his 75th birthday sermon, he pokes fun at himself a little bit. "I have talked about myself, a thing which it is my purpose commonly to avoid, but I crave your indulgence. I never was 75 years old before, and have had no practice in speaking from such an eminence." He spoke of having modest expectations upon his arrival at Plymouth. He writes, "That was a day of small externals and large hopes. There was much to be done in the making of Plymouth Church. Its meeting house was a shell not worth $500. Its membership on the ground was less than 140, but we were disposed to work together." And the accomplishments were significant. Satellite churches, a new building, membership increased more than 4 times, and a vigorous program. The new building across the street at 7th and Locust was erected at a cost of $37,000, and it served the congregation for 25 years. I love this picture with the horses and buggies lined up, the muddy streets of which Frisbie had written very much in evidence. We still have the cornerstone from that church. It is mounted in the new atrium and visible high overhead when one enters the building from the upper level of the parking structure. There were satellite churches, Pilgrim to the east, which later was absorbed back into Plymouth. North Park to the north similarly was absorbed when it disbanded in 1917. And Greenwood to the west later merged with Plymouth when we relocated to 42nd and Ingersoll. But these neighborhood churches served faithfully in their day, largely due to Frisbie's vision and foresight. And meanwhile, the Plymouth program was active, with an assistant pastor, a hearty welcome to non-members, activities for children and youth, and a midweek prayer meeting. Here is the Plymouth Sunday School standing in front of the new building on a cold Sunday morning, with Dr. Frisbie standing among them. Plymouth in these days was known for progressive practices in religious education. Here is a picture of Mrs. A.Y. Rawson's Sunday school class in 1890, all decked out for their performance in a play entitled The Ruggles Family. These church school classes would stay with the same teacher over many years, and they grew very close over time. One of the members of this class, Frank L. Kramer, became the founder and general superintendent of the Sunbeam Rescue Mission, a major outreach effort in Des Moines. This is worthy of a chapter all its own, but just briefly now, Sunbeam existed from 1893 to 1906 as a multi-purpose social agency in Des Moines, and it all started from the Sunday school class at Plymouth. Many of the names from that class appear on donor lists for the Sunbeam Rescue Mission throughout its history. This was the level of activity during the Frisbie years. Here is a picture of the 8th and Pleasant building that was dedicated 3 years after Frisbie's retirement. We'll have much more to say about it in a subsequent chapter. Frisbie's love of new church starts was evident even after his Plymouth pastorate had ended. In 1915, 16 years after Frisbie retired, the Waveland Park Church was founded on Des Moines' west side. It was made possible in large part through a loan from the Congregational Church Building Society, an entity Frisbie envisioned many years earlier, and which he was instrumental in establishing through our denomination. So his influence continued for many years. The Frisbies are buried in Des Moines, in Woodland Cemetery. Here is the grave of Alva's first wife, Jerusha Slocum Frisbie, along with the grave of the child in whose birth she died. And here is the grave of Martha Crosby Frisbie. And here lies A.L. Frisbie, pastor of Plymouth Church for 46 years. His hopes for Plymouth were given eloquent expression at the conclusion of his 75th birthday sermon. That there may ever be here intelligent Christians, not afraid to drop the old when the new is better, but never hastening to the new merely because it is new. I think of the church in 2005, the present Plymouth, with every good thing of our day broader, deeper, and more fruitful. Frisbie is honored with a stained glass window in the east transept of the sanctuary, moved there from the 8th and Pleasant building, and the pulpit chair in which the preacher sits each Sunday is a reminder of the rich legacy Frisbie left. His was a remarkable spirit and a remarkable pastorate. clearly our King David figure of the 19th century.